And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Laraib. As we are here, finally, it is playoff time. We are here to preview and pick every single NFL Super Wildcard Weekend game for this NFL 2025 slate of the playoffs. We are super excited to get into each and every one of these matchups. Now, we've taken a little bit of a unplanned hiatus, so I'll just go ahead and say that. Just with the holidays, work schedules, things like that getting in the way. But we are here for playoffs. We weren't going to miss these playoff matchups. But big things did happen these past few weeks. To quickly recap in terms of the first and goal news, Laraib, I'll let you take this one away.
Let me go ahead and pull up those picks for you, Mr. Butler. For our viewers, we didn't do a week 17 or a week 18 predictions episode, but we both tied in week 17, which meant I had a 1-game lead going into week 18. And so Lewis really needed a win to tie for the season. And in a week where we did not know what the hell was going to happen with some of these teams, honestly, great performances by both of us. 14 and 11 is really good, but I come out on top with a 2-game victory lead over Lewis to finish out the regular season, making me back-to-back regular season champs on the First and Goal podcast. I'm hoping to start my playoff streak this year, but that means I have won the Lanes instead of the Canes award, and so we will be figuring that out later on, within the next month or so before the playoffs end. And so, great regular season by me, but the playoffs, that's where it really starts to get fun.
Yeah, congratulations, Laraib, on the regular season. Last week, oh brother, that was a brutal Sunday of events. I mean, the Patriots just can't afford to win. They can't. I lock in the Bills, and they go ahead and squander the number 1 overall pick and then fire Gerard Mayo. Just what an absolute catastrophe over there. And there's so much stuff I could get into with some of the stupidity that happened in week 18. But alas, those teams will get into next season draft time. Those losers. Here, we're talking about the cream of the crop, the top 14 teams in the NFL. Obviously, the Lions and Chiefs are on bye. They are the number 1 overall seeds in each conference. So the remaining 12 teams will be playing Sunday, Monday, and Saturday. And Laraib, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Saturday, 4:30, 3:30 Eastern time. We have the Los Angeles Chargers traveling to Houston to face the Texans. Texans, always love this early Saturday slot. Me and Laraib, before the playoffs start, we like to try to predict which teams are going to end up in which slots. Because, the networks like to put the best games in the certain slots. This was an almost 100% guarantee. The Texans and the Chargers were going to play in the early Saturday slot. Nevertheless, Chargers are 3-point favorites on the road, which is, home dog for the playoffs. Texans. Laura, let's just go ahead and go straight into the matchups. Looking at it from the Chargers side, what, in your opinion, gives them the 3-point advantage on the road? What is their biggest matchup advantage in this game?
It has to be their offensive line versus the Texans' defensive line. That's going to be the huge emphasis for them in this game. Obviously, Justin Herbert is the big elephant in the room, and he is quite big. But I think this offensive line, what really is going to determine the game for me is going to be Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt versus Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. If the Texans want to win this game, it's going to be a hard fought, defensive nose battle where you're really just trying to grind it out. And I just think the Chargers are the better team right now, especially the way they've been playing all season long. The Texans 1-5 against teams with winning records. You think about some of the bad losses they've had. They really slowed down. They've had some injury problems. And Bobby Slowick, someone who was supposed to be, hot on the market this year and supposed to be in those conversations with Ben Johnson as someone who's going to be a great offensive mind, really has mucked it up this year for this Texans offense. And so just going back to the Chargers, I think they're going to really control the ball, run it down this Texans defensive throat, who have been, great all season long. But I just think they're going to have trouble keeping up with Justin Herbert in a game like this, especially when you think about the Chargers and the tumultuous history that they've had, and the last time we saw them in the playoffs blowing a 27-point lead. That will not happen with Harbaugh here. We talk about a culture that they were building all season long. This is what it's led to, going on the road in the playoffs. Let me see that culture continue to build in a game of high stakes like this one.
Yeah, and then from the Texans' offensive standpoint, Laura, I think the biggest way that they could even have a chance in this game is with Nico Collins, because obviously no Diggs, no Dell really hampers their offensive production, and recently they have not been able to run the ball successfully at all, and you're really not going to be able to against this Chargers defensive front. So especially this Chargers defense, DeMeco Ryans likes to play a lot of off coverage, bringing a lot of guys back, man-to-man coverage, and heavy emphasis on stopping the run, forcing CJ Stroud to make plays, which this season not been really that effective, except for the deep shots to Nico Collins. And if those are there, and this is a defensive muck-it-up game, like you're saying the Texans are trying to achieve on that side of the ball, maybe a low-scoring game, a shot play here and there, getting into field goal range, or potentially even into the end zone, would flip this game the Texans' way. But you mentioned the Chargers just have so many more reliable, consistent ways to win in this ball game. Because I don't think the Texans are going to be able to run the ball effectively. I don't think they're going to be able to protect CJ Stroud effectively. Meanwhile, you mentioned it. The Chargers, they will be able to run the ball, and they have decent options on the outside to move the ball. Justin Herbert, obviously the better quarterback in this matchup. And it's just about moving the ball consistently, third down conversions. And I don't think this Texans offense is going to get into a lot of third and manageable situations to get consistent drives going, which they would have to rely on a lot of deep shots, a lot of tomfoolery. You might see a few trick plays here and there from Bobby Slowick trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But I just trust there's more efficient ways for the Chargers to effectively put this game away, that I trust them more in this matchup. Now, I don't love laying 3 points to a home dog, especially in the playoffs. But the Texans, let's be honest, have not played good football in like 3 months. If we're really being, they have what you said, one win against playoff team that was in the Bills in like week 4. So it's been a long time removed from that. And the team that I trust more playing better football right now is the Chargers, Laraib. So I am going to pick the Chargers in this matchup. I will say it's lower scoring, but I think it's going to be a kind of a steady Chargers double, 2-score lead the entire time, just kind of stiff arming this Texans team. I'm going to say Chargers 23 to Texans 16.
And I'm going to go with the team with a better head coach, better quarterback. I'm going to take the Chargers, who recently signed Ezekiel Elliott. So that means the Gus bus is officially out of gas. But, but J.K. Dobbins, he came back last week, had a great game. Quentin Johnston, QJ, also quit jogging. He quit jogging last week against the Raiders, had an outstanding game with 10 receptions and over 100 receiving yards. If he can just be that secondary guy who can complement Ladd McConkey, I think the Chargers are due for a great game. I think they win 24-20 as Justin Herbert wins his first ever playoff game.
About dang time for him, I should say. Now we move on to our next Saturday game. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Baltimore, as Baltimore is a whopping 9.5-point favorite. And last time this, these two teams played 2 times this regular season. They split, Steelers winning the first one, muck it up, ugly, super physical game. The second one, Ravens, Lamar finally got that monkey off his back and just dominated this Steelers team. And then a big thing in that game were 2 huge turnovers, a fumble, and then the Marlon Humphrey pick 6 that really put that game away for the Ravens. What I want to ask you, which one of those matchups, Laraib, do you think will reflect more onto this playoff game in Baltimore?
It has to be that second one that we saw, right? In the last 4 weeks, let me just read you some stats. The Ravens, third in total offense and first in total defense. The Steelers, on the other hand, 31st in offense and 29th in total defense. And it's just been a complete reversal from that first matchup that we saw. And this Steelers team, We talk about George Pickens going in and out of the lineup. The run game has not been too efficient, but it's really been Russell Wilson and his inability to really force the ball whenever they need to. And Arthur Smith and his conservative play calling. You think back to him last year at the head coach in Atlanta, it was a lot of conservative run, run, run. We're just going to keep on trying to play this hard-nosed football and try to muck up these games and win tight, close games. But for the Ravens in a situation like this, we'll talk about the Bills too in a second, but you and I both agree these are must-win games for these franchises and both of these quarterbacks. You talk about some, two guys who really want to get on that Mahomes level. This is the type of stakes that they have in this type of game. And so I just think the Ravens just dominate this one, to be quite frank with you. I just don't see the Steelers in any way, especially in, with, TJ Watt being banged up. He still played last week. They just have not looked impressive to me whatsoever. Kind of similar to the Texans. And so I think the Ravens just dominate this one.
I will say on face value, when I see a 9.5-point spread for a Mike Tomlin led Steelers team, playing a divisional opponent on the road, and games that when these two teams play, we talked about it in both these matchups in the regular season, it feels like the underdog coach always has some tricks up his sleeves and it's never that easy of a game. But that second matchup was pretty showing, Laraib, and you hit on a lot of good points there. This Steelers offense has just been anemic. And what I want to give a lot more credit to is how this Ravens defense has been able to turn around, especially since that first matchup. The secondary really shored up. Marlon Humphrey has really turned into a shutdown corner, dealt with some injuries early on in the season, but he's been a huge game changer for them. And then some other secondary guys really shoring up that back end. And they still had a really good rush defense to begin with. Kyle Van Noy, really impressive on that defensive front, along with Matabike and
Odafe Owe.
Owe, yes. So I think they have the pieces, especially against this sputtering Steelers offense, which I just don't know. George Pickens, really, really bad week last week against the Bengals. All those drops, just him and Russ were not on the same page whatsoever. And it got to a point where I was looking at Justin Fields on the sideline, like, who genuinely gives us a better chance to win at this point? And even in this game, like, if Justin Fields is the quarterback, maybe it's a point or two better in the spread towards the Steelers, but still, I think Lamar and this Ravens team, their expectations, what they have their goals set on for this season is so much higher than what this Steelers team can achieve right now. Lamar playing at this MVP level, year in, year out. I think this is a huge statement game for Lamar. I think he puts a lot of doubters to rest in this one. Now, there's still a lot of playoffs to go. And this, Mike Tomlin, I don't feel great about this, especially the news today. Zay Flowers will be out for this game against the Steelers, which I don't love, especially, now Joey Porter Jr. probably going to guard Bateman on the outside, really kind of limit some of the Ravens passing options. But you still have Andrews, you still have Likely, and obviously Derrick Henry had a monster game against the Steelers. They just have way more options offensively than the Steelers team. And the mismatches across the board, I just don't see a way. If these teams played 10 times, I think the Ravens would win 9 out of 10. Now, could this be that 1 out of 10 where the Steelers get a bunch of turnovers and Lamar goes pumpkin mode? Potentially, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, a huge emphasis on that 1 out of 10 where Lamar does go pumpkin mode. I mean, we have to address it. He regresses in the playoffs.
He gets antsy.
Those are his words that he said. But you have to look at some of his numbers from the regular season and to when he goes in the playoffs. I think the 2019 season, the lowest points the Ravens scored was in their playoff game. 2020, the lowest points they scored was in a playoff game. Same thing for 2021.
Every single year he's been in the playoffs, the lowest points he scored the entire season has been in their final playoff game.
Right. And so it's about getting that monkey off your back. Now, you're a 2-time MVP, potentially 3. You're almost that veteran unk status now in this locker room. Time to step up and show this divisional opponent who you've seen many times, who's given you a lot of trouble in the past couple of years. Show them that you're able to dominate them at home and continue your playoff journey. I'm going to go ahead and pick the Ravens 27-19.
And I'm going to go big, Laraib. I'm going Ravens 35 to Steelers 13. They're going to put a massive exclamation mark. We are here. We are not the team from last year. This is not the Lamar from seasons past. And we are here to make a statement in this year's postseason. But let's go ahead to another team that has super lofty goals this postseason, and that is the Buffalo Bills hosting the Denver Broncos. Buffalo 8.5-point favorite Sunday at noon. And, this is a very interesting spot here for this Broncos team, especially their defense, Laura, because the way they like to play defense is you have Pat Surtain on the number one outside receiver, takes him away, and they rely a lot on their defense to get sacks, get pressure with four, those, Zach Allen, Nick Bonito, just stud defensive linemen to get that pressure and force, the quarterbacks into quick mistakes and just really muck up their game plan. But that kind of plays exactly into the Bills' favor because, okay, so what? Pat Surtain's going to take away Amari Cooper all game. They're like one of two teams in the NFL where Pat Surtain taking away a receiver doesn't change their offense whatsoever. I mean, do they put Surtain on Cooper, on Keon Coleman, on Shakir? Either way, Josh Allen will find a way to carve you up over the middle. And with Joe Brady has always done a really good job, especially, coming from his time at LSU, even during his time at Carolina, was the quick game, especially with finding your running backs out of the backfield, whether it be Ty Johnson, James Cook, Ray Davis, who won't be in this game, obviously. But, the quick game, getting the ball out quick, getting Josh Allen on the move. And that does not favor this Broncos defense because Josh Allen, the lowest sack percentage, not only of his career, not only this season, but since they've been, tracking the stat, lowest sack percentage of any quarterback since they've been tracking sack percentage. So he does an insane job of avoiding sacks, avoiding negative plays, really cutting down on turnovers. And to be honest, this Broncos defense, if they're not able to get pressure and they're not able to create turnovers, not that great. Yards per game, about middling in the NFL. And I think Josh Allen, just the superstar offensive juggernaut that he is alone, is just going to dwarf, whatever this Broncos offense can do on that side of the ball. And I think this is a really bad matchup for this Broncos defense.
Yeah, and flipping on over to that Broncos offense that you mentioned, what they've really done this season with Bo Nix has been a lot of that dink and dunk, and then, that really long go ball to Cortland Sutton. And that's how they've really been operating. But Sean McDermott, he's going to shut that down. Someone who's been a defensive minded head coach who likes to play a lot of zone, and that's going to really take away a lot of that underneath stuff. And that means you're really relying on, Audric Estime and Javonte Williams to really open up the passing game for them. But I just think this Bills defense is going to be flying all over the field in this one, especially, we'll talk about another rookie quarterback who's making his first ever start in the playoffs. I just think historically they struggle. I think, they're just going to have a really hard time with Bo Nix. They're going to shut him down. And for this Broncos team on this season, I brought this up. This is my third time bringing it up, but against teams with over 500 winning records, the Broncos are 2-7, including that Chiefs game where they benched everybody. So really 1-7 against teams with winning records. And they, we talk about some of the losses they had this year to the Ravens where they got steamrolled, to the Chargers where they really, really gave up that huge lead that they had. I just don't think they're gonna be able to hang in this game with a team like the Bills. And like you mentioned, who can kill you in so many different ways with their offense. I think the Bills explode on this Broncos team and win this game handily. And another, I brought it up with Lamar Jackson. This is almost a must-win situation for a team like this when you've been in the playoffs so many times and you're trying to get to that Mahomes level. This is where it starts. I'm going to go ahead and take the Bills 35-20.
Another thing that I think has been underrated for this Bills defense, Christian Benford's really transformed into a shutdown corner. And I think he's going to have a majority of the Cortland Sutton matchup in this game. And if he's able to take away Sutton, this Broncos offense becomes very limited. Now, I think they have a really good interior offensive line. Quinn Miners, Ben Powers have been really good in that interior. So if there is a way they can consistently move the ball 4 or 5 yards, Estime, Javonte Williams just going up the gut on a relatively weaker Buffalo, middle, but on the road in Buffalo, I think there's going to be a lot of third and longs and sketchy situations for this Broncos offense. And I think this can get out of hand quickly. Now, I don't think, for Bo Nix and then, for Jayden Daniels, who we'll talk about later, these guys are experienced. They have a lot of starts in college. So I don't think there's going to be that typical rookie drop off. I think Bo Nix will have a fine game in this one, but you're going up against a superhero. And that's what's going to be the biggest, deciding factor. And I think it's such a massive gap that I'm going to give the Bills an advantage in this one. And I think that's going to be another shellacking. I have the Bills winning 28 to Broncos 16 in this ball game, Laraib.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move
Bills.
on to the Sunday slate. We have a huge matchup with the Packers going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. The Eagles favored by 4.5. And this is, two teams with banged up quarterbacks, right? Who are both expected to play. But, you think about the Eagles mindset last week. You didn't have anything to play for. You go ahead and you benched all your guys, and you're coming into this game well rested. On the other side, you had the Packers who what ultimately ended up being a meaningless game. Your number one outside wide receiver, Christian Watson, tears his ACL, is done for the season, and your starting quarterback gets hit in the arm and he can't feel his hand after the game.
Not great.
I expect him to play. I expect Jalen Hurts to play, but just two different teams with two different mindsets going into this. And now the Eagles, you can tell me Jalen Hurts is not playing in this game, and I'm still picking them, purely based on their defense. I think they have the best defense in the NFC right now, the way they've been playing this entire season. You talk about the studs that they have on that front seven, who's going to stop that rush from Josh Jacobs, put a lot of pressure on Jordan Love. And I just think this is a guy without Christian, this is an offense, without Christian Watson, who really struggles. I love Jayden Reed. You know me, I love Reed. I love Wicks, but those are just guys you can't count on, especially in a game of this caliber against this sort of defense. I just think the Packers are really going to struggle offensively, and that's going to open up a whole lot of things for this Eagles offense.
And, sometimes whenever you have teams who faced in the regular season, you like to go back and look at that matchup and see what happened, what advantage to try to take care of. But when that game was all the way in week 1 in Brazil, you kind of throw it out. Now, I will say Jayden Reed was very impressive in that game and looked like a potential number 1 receiver for the Packers this year. But, dealing with injuries, he's kind of been banged up. So you're right. There isn't that consistent outside weapon that really scares you. And, at that time, the Eagles defense, 2 rookies in their first start, they were pretty shaky. And DeJean wasn't even really playing that much. And, obviously Quinyon Mitchell making his first start wasn't what he is now as a, definite first team all rookie, defensive rookie of the year candidate who's just been an absolute stud on the outside for the Eagles all season long. So the matchups just, I think this Eagles team is just a better version of this Packers team, and no Jair Alexander in this game. So Jalen Hurts coming back, and AJ Brown, I think, is going to have a monster game in this spot going up against a soft Packers secondary that really relies on turnovers and takeaways, kind of similar to this Broncos defense, where if they're not able to get those splash plays defensively, they're not really that effective of a unit. Overall, they can get run on a lot, as we've seen the past few weeks. The Lions just killed them on the ground. The Vikings killed them on the ground. So I think this Eagles team, good job. We were talking about, do you play Saquon? Do you not play Saquon for, to get the record? He could still get the record for, full season rushing if they go to the Super Bowl and they have, I think he's like 400 yards away, which, you play 4 more games. That's pretty obtainable. And it all starts this week. There's just way too many ways the Eagles can affect this Packers team. Honestly, this 4.5 point line is a little low in my opinion. I really like the Eagles in this spot. I do respect LaFleur. I think they have the coaching advantage, at least head coach. But what Vic Fangio has done for this Eagles defense that you alluded to, just transforming this unit and the dominant defense they've been, I think they're so well balanced that I have to go with the Eagles in this spot, especially at home. And, you brought it up in those last 2 matchups. I think with the Ravens and the Bills, this is another spot for me where this Eagles team, you did not build this team. You did not invest in all these pieces to lose in a spot like this. The Packers are a young, up-and-coming team that has a bright future ahead of them. You have your stars now. You have A.J. Brown. You have Smitty. You have Saquon. You have Jalen Hurts, Jalen Carter, all these guys, these super impactful players who can win now. This is not a spot, especially at home in Philadelphia, you can afford to lose. And I love the Eagles in this spot. I'm going Philly 30 to Packers 20 in this ball game.
Yep, and I have to agree with you. One other note: the Packers, 1-6 in their division, could easily have been, excuse me, 1-5 in division, easily could have been 0-6. -1 blocked kick, and then 0 and
Right.
5 against teams with 11 or more wins this season. They just have not, I think a lot of people love this Packers team coming into the season, especially what they had, but with the injuries piling up, with some of their defensive mistakes, I just don't think they can live up to a team like the Eagles. And like you're mentioning about, the standard for this Eagles team, I think no one knows that more than Nick Sirianni. You go to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and then you get bounced in the first round by the Bucks. I think this is a huge game for him. I think, they will put up with your antics in Philadelphia as long as you keep on winning. I think they keep on winning in this one. I'm going to take the Packers to win 30-24.
All right, Laraib. Well, so far we're four
Or
for
the
four.
Eagles. Eagles.
Eagles, yeah, yeah. Come on. So far we're 4 for 4 in the picks. Let's see if that stays consistent here as we have Sunday night football. The Commanders traveling to Tampa to face the aforementioned Bucks. Tampa favored by 3 in this ball game. Tampa, pretty big. We don't really discuss it a lot come playoff time because some of these teams are just one and done year in, year out. But Tampa with a significant playoff advantage. This is the first time the Bucks have been in the playoffs since 2020. With Trevor, I don't even Taylor Heineke. What? I'm wrong.
They were in the playoffs last year and they beat the Eagles at home.
Did I say Bucks? I meant Commanders.
Oh, yes, Commanders.
Yeah,
Sorry.
this Washington franchise since 2020, and yeah, no,
Hey,
the
shout out
Bucks.
Taylor Heineke.
The Bucks, for what I was saying is they have the significant playoff experience advantage. Obviously, some of these guys being on that the Super Bowl team a few years ago, but even then, Baker leading them to the playoffs last year. They've been a pretty consistent playoff mainstay since Baker's been on the team and for the past few years in that division, the NFC South. But this Commanders team, a lot of interesting matchups to get to. This is another kind of weird example like the Packers-Eagles game where these two teams did play this season, but it was way all the way back in week 1, and the Buccaneers pretty much owned that game, but a lot of it, Chris Godwin had a huge impact on the game. Jayden Daniels' leading receiver was Austin Eckler. So you kind of throw that game out, and it's really like, what have you done for me lately? And there's so many matchups to look forward to in this game. Rob, what is a huge matchup that you're looking forward to watching in this one?
It is this rushing attack. I know we love Baker Mayfield. I know we love Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. He has taken over that number 2 Chris Godwin role. I know you're rolling your eyes, but he had a huge touchdown. He's kind of becoming one of those go-to guys for Baker Mayfield in this offense, but who I'm really looking at in this game, someone who wasn't really emphasized much in this first matchup, Bucky Irving, who has been dominant as a rookie running back, facing this third worst
Leading
ranked
rusher in that
rush defense of the Commanders. When the Bucks rush for 140 or more yards, Lewis, they are 5-0. And this Commanders team gives up over 130 rushing yards per game. I think the Bucks, at home, let this Commanders team march into town and they run all over them in a huge win.
Okay, so we're going ahead and throwing our cards on the table.
Yeah.
Rob,
Yeah.
a matchup that I'm looking forward to. And, this player wasn't even on the team week 1 and holds a special place in my heart. And that is Marshon Lattimore going up against a very familiar foe in Mike Evans. And how has Marshon Lattimore fared against Mike Evans and their matchups? Well, averaging 35 receiving yards for his entire career against Marshon Lattimore, averaging less than 2 catches a game, and effectively gets eliminated from the game. So and we saw, even in the last Commanders in their last impactful game against the Falcons, right? A lot of that was Bijan Robinson really, being the force in that first half, running the ball. But this Commanders team can lock down in the rushing game. And if they're able to eliminate this Buccaneers rushing game that gets some guys back, Jonathan Allen cleared for practice. It looked like he might be able to play in this game. That's a huge plus for this front. And without Mike Evans, the passing game is very reliant on Jalen McMillan, who, you bring up has had a good season, also leads the entire NFC in drops this year. So big playoff game, his first matchup. We'll see, don't get 25 on the field. I'll say that. Benjamin St. Juice gets on this defense. Yikes. But they have some other decent corners on this team. Mike Sander still also making his first playoff game. What this boils down for me is actually this Commanders offense and what they're going to be able to do, especially differently from that first matchup. I think this Buccaneers defense has been ravaged this season, especially by high-level quarterbacks. I mean, early on in the season, they played pretty well, but injuries have really devastated them, especially in the back end. And, you look at some of their last matchups against really good quarterbacks, 30 points given up, 25 given up. And I think Jayden Daniels has found a state. I think this is going to be a close game entering the fourth quarter. And then, I saw 8 games this year. The Commanders have been trailing or tied entering the fourth quarter. They've won them all. And in a big playoff spot, you mentioned, Jayden Daniels, rookies starting in their first playoff game, not very successful. But he's just had a different, aura about him this year. And I think on the ground, he will find a way to get it done. And I just have a feeling about this Commanders team. They've been the team of magic all season long. This Bucks team, hot and cold. And Baker Mayfield, he's been very impressive this year. 4,500 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. Been pretty careless with the football. And we've even seen this Commanders team overcome interceptions. And they have, the third best fourth down conversion rate in the NFL history. So Jayden Daniels gets it done, especially, you have 4 downs to do it. Now, that being said, the Buccaneers actually have the best third down conversion percentage in NFL history. I was looking at the stats too, so that doesn't make me feel good. This is going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be close going into the fourth quarter. And honestly, the quarterback I trust more and the offense I trust more is the rookie, is the kid, Jayden Daniels. And I do think the Commanders win this game on the road. And what will be the highest scoring and what I think, and maybe what you think as well, will be the most entertaining game of this Super Wildcard Weekend. I have the Washington Commanders winning 34-31 in an absolute beast of a game.
Your team might have the aura, but my team, the Buccaneers, they have swagger. I know that's not hip.
That's old school.
That's not hip these days with
Chill out,
all the new gens. But with these old gens, with that old tech, we got swagger on this side. I think Bucky Irving he's gonna keep on pounding that rock. I think Cade Otton is gonna exploit this horrendous secondary of the Commanders.
Bobby Wagner, baby.
Antoine Winfield Jr. is returning for this game after missing the last 4. The Bucks have been up and down all season long. They've had close games against the Chiefs that they lost, close games against the Ravens that they lost.
The Saints.
Head-scratching game against the Saints.
Close game against the Ravens.
It was close for a moment.
Yeah.
Head-scratching loss to the Cowboys. They have also beaten a team like the Eagles at home. They've beaten a team like the Lions on the road.
That was in
They've
2024.
been in the playoffs last year. This is a team with experience. Your cardiac kids, eventually your heartbeat stops, Lewis. I'm going to take the Buccaneers to win 30-27.
All right, that's going to be an very, very exciting matchup that I know me and you will both be extremely keyed in on, as we will for all these games. But we are not done yet, Laraib. We still have one more matchup to go, and that is the Minnesota Vikings traveling to Los Angeles to face the Rams. Rams are a 1-point underdog. Now, this did change. It opened at 3. So 2-point favor swinging in the Rams' direction. Now, just to get ahead of it, this game's still unclear whether or not it will be played in Los Angeles or if it will be moved. And we send our thoughts and prayers out to everyone in the Los Angeles area who's been affected by the wildfires. Just awful devastation. And we send our condolences out to everyone in that area who's going through it right now. So whether this game gets played in Los Angeles or Arizona, I don't think that changes the outcome of the game that much. Just wanted to get ahead of it there. But going into the football game, Laraib, there's so many ways that you can look at this. And I'm not going to tip my hand now. I'm going to go ahead and give you the start here. Minnesota coming off probably definitely their worst game of the season in a must-win game, 31-9, drubbing by the Lions. Probably got some people off their scent, really and as you can see, the bettors in this game really favoring the Rams in this matchup. But when I ask you, which quarterback or which offensive arsenal do you trust more in a playoff spot like this one?
I mean, that's simple. It's very easy. It's rudimentary. How about the team with the Super Bowl winning head coach and quarterback? How about Matthew freaking Stafford, Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback against Sam Darnold, who in his biggest game of his career turned into a pumpkin on Sunday Night Football on the big stage. I'm picking the team with Matthew freaking Stafford. I mean, a team last week who got to rest all their starters. Matthew Stafford's pretty old. Cooper Kupp is pretty old. Kyron Williams has been a bell cow all season long. They all got to rest at home and enjoy their weekend. Meanwhile, the Vikings having to go on the road to Detroit in a huge matchup. You're putting all your cards on the table, trying to get that bye. And what did you do? What did you do in that high stakes game, Sam Darnold? You started seeing ghosts on the field. It was you're acting like it's October 31st, the way you were missing all these guys. It was just horrendous what I saw. And these two teams also matched up in week 8 in a game where Sam Darnold once again came up short in the red zone. The amount of times that this team has had to settle for 3 or go for it on 4th down and not get it. I just think Matthew Stafford is going to dominate this one, especially against this Vikings team who loves to blitz and who loves to play this cover 2 zone. Matthew Stafford has been dominating that his entire career. And this Vikings defense giving up the 5th most passing yards in the NFL this season. I think Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are going to dominate. And Puka Nacua, this is a guy that we're going to start talking about in the next 2 or 3 years, being on that same level with the guy on the other side of the field and Justin Jefferson, with a guy like Jamar Chase, with a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. This guy dominates with the ball in his hands. His body control, his ability to catch the ball is unparalleled. And I'm picking the Rams to win this game.
I mulled over this one for a while. And the thing I want to pinpoint that you brought up is Matt Stafford against this Brian Flores scheme defense, because we see this defense, this hyper-aggressive, exotic blitz defense, heavily reliance on man coverage on the outside. We see that that's a huge thing that Brian Flores does, and it can get to a lot of guys. But this is a defense that you mentioned Stafford has faced a lot in his career. Going back from his time in Detroit, even when Green Bay ran a very similar, aggressive defense. And then obviously this is something that Kyle Shanahan and they run, the 49ers like to run in San Francisco. So he's familiar against the exotic blitz schemes and the man-to-man coverage, which I want to highlight because guys like Byron Murphy and then some of these secondary guys, the Vikings, who have had very good seasons, a lot of picks. But what does that mean? What do a lot of picks for a corner tell you about? They get targeted a lot. And when it's a good quarterback and a good receiver, as you mentioned, the results aren't really going in the corner's favor. And we even saw in the last matchup, Jared Goff didn't look that impressive against this defense. He had 2 interceptions, kind of just lackluster. But what was he able to do? He was able to convert on 3rd downs, stay in the pocket. You saw so many times Jared Goff with pressure in his face, finding that guy, when they bring in the zero blitz, finding Jameson Williams, finding these, speedy receivers across the middle and converting these 3rd downs. And I think Matt Stafford is going to do just that in this game. I mulled this one over, but ultimately, I agree with you, Laraib. I do like the Rams in this game. I think the matchups favor them. And as far as offensively, I don't think Cooper Kupp, maybe the week off does energize him more, but he's kind of been a non-factor. But really, as dominant as Puka's been and giving him and Kyron Williams a week off, I think it will energize them and get them ready for this matchup. And then over on the other side of the ball, I think if the Vikings aren't able to run the ball and get Sam Darnold set up in a play action scheme where he's able to find his plethora of targets on the outside, it's going to be a struggle. He was sailing a lot of balls in that game against Detroit. And this, I would say at this moment in time, this Rams defensive front is more impressive than that Lions defensive front that we saw last week. There's going to be a ton of pressure. It's going to be a lot of physical football. And I don't think the Vikings are going to be able to run the ball effectively against this Rams front. Kobe Brown, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk on the inside are going to cause a lot of problems for this Vikings offensive line, who's been pretty solid so far. But if they get pressured, they got 3 sacks on Darnold in their first matchup and 6 quarterback hits. I think that continues here. And Sam Darnold has to prove to me. We are picking these teams to advance in the NFL playoffs. And what I trust is not necessarily what I've seen before, because obviously I just picked Jayden and the Commanders, but it's what is the more effective method? I've seen Sam Darnold in massive spots let me down, whereas I've seen Jayden Daniels in spots, elevate in fourth quarters and big, gotta have it moments where I have not seen Darnold reach that point. And in this game, I think Stafford will be able to do that. He hasn't been too effective the past few weeks, but I think you get this week off. You kind of knew who you were going to play. And then you mentioned it. Huge emotional, physical game against the Lions last week. Now to turn around, travel across the country to play the Rams. This is a spot where I like the Rams in this matchup. I think it's going to be a close game. And I think ultimately turnovers will decide it. And I think it'll lean the Rams' favor. I have the Rams in this ball game in a lower scoring game, 23-20.
And I'm going to go with the Rams 27-24. You mentioned a Sam Darnold air mailing passes last week. Does he have that confidence to stay in the pocket, take those big hits, and deliver strikes to Justin Jefferson, to TJ Hawkinson? They have a good shot in this game, but it's all going to be on Darnold's shoulders. And one more thing, huge Kyren Williams game. We saw Jahmyr Gibbs in the receiving game last week. Brian Flores, you mentioned it, huge zero blitz guy. You just dump the ball off to Kyren Williams, let him go to work. Matthew Stafford, he had a receiving touchdown in the first game these two teams played. I think he's due for another one here, but I think the Rams win at home.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for our Super Wildcard Weekend playoff predictions. Before we get out of here, I want to throw a little best bet action. Obviously, we don't have our locked upsets because these games are all so massive that we don't want to have to change a pick because we don't want to pick that team. But my best bet, we mentioned it, it's the teams that can't afford to lose. They've built these teams for long playoff runs. Their season cannot end in the wild card round. That's the Ravens, the Bills, and the Eagles. All three of those teams, parlay them, you get plus 100 odds. I just think those teams cannot afford to lose. They're all at home. They're all high seeds. They've all won 12 plus games. This is a spot where they all move on to the next round, and then the rubber meets the road. But they cannot afford to lose in this spot. So that is a good value that I see there. Laraib, did you have a best bet in mind?
Yeah, I just mentioned it. Kyren Williams, anytime touchdown. He has been the engine for this Rams team when Matthew Stafford got off to a slow start. Like I mentioned earlier, he already had a touchdown the last time these two teams played. We saw what Jahmyr Gibbs last week. Kyren Williams, maybe not that same, speed factor on the outside, but someone who can really run between the tackles, pick up those extra yards, pick up that 1 yard touchdown at the goal line. Give me Kyren Williams anytime touchdown.
All right, Laraib, well, that's going to do it for the weekend. So much exciting football. We are going to be doing our quick shorts after all the games to give you our instant reactions following them. And we will be back to break down all of these wildcard games and their implications. Hopefully next week we'll find some time. I'll get with you about that, Laraib. But besides that, Laraib, anything you want to say before we head out of here?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.